All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Hot Seat Automotive Podcast. It's your buddy CJ here. And tonight, we're talking about all things automotive industry, the car guy hobby, cars, the home of real gearhead talk. Real gearhead talk, right here, Hot Seat Automotive Podcast with your buddy CJ. Welcome back to all of my subscribers. You know I love each and every one of you, and I'm so grateful for you. Guys, if you're new to the channel, please give me a like and subscribe. Around here, we talk about all things automotive hobby culture, the automotive industry, cars. We get into a little bit of pop culture in the context of the automotive hobby, which is where we're going to focus tonight. Going to kind of have a little bit of fun tonight. And guys, listen, as one automotive enthusiast to another, we enjoy talking about cars. We enjoy talking about automotive culture, the car guy hobby, and all things that are of interest to automotive enthusiasts. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Guys, tonight's episode is going to be kind of fun. And for me, for your buddy CJ, it's kind of special and important. I'll tell you why. You know, there's a lot of talk right now and interest in the Mad Max franchise. Mad Max was produced and came out in 1979, 1980, the original film starring Mel Gibson. There's now been 5 films in the series, including Furiosa, which just came out in 2024, getting a lot of press. It's all over the media, right? And, I guess I'm not sure exactly how well it's doing, but that's not what I'm really here to talk about tonight. All this talk about the new film in the franchise has got me reminiscing a bit about where it all started. The first 2 films, Mad Max and The Road Warrior. Guys, these films are important. These films mean something to pop culture, to the history of the action, thriller, action, adventure genre, particularly in the 1980s, okay? These films had significant influence and endeared themselves to automotive enthusiasts, and we're going to talk about why. In fact, most car guys that you talk to are fans of these films, specifically the first 2 films. And we're going to dissect that a bit tonight. We're going to get right into it. I'm going to share my experience as a young man growing up in the 80s and what these films meant to me and why I claim they are so important to the history of the automotive enthusiast hobby and how we are represented and how our hobby is integrated into cinema, into film, and into the media right up to 2024. There's a history there. There's a tie-in. So we're going to get into all of that tonight. We're going to focus on the first 2 films, but, a couple things I want to just get right off the bat here. Guys, this is not going to be an academic documentary about the making of Mad Max and The Road Warrior. Okay, there are plenty of other YouTube videos, documentaries, articles written, blogs, where you can find out all that stuff. That's not what this episode is about. I'm here to talk to you about sort of key elements of the films that I think really endear them to us under the lens and in the context of the automotive enthusiast. Why I think these films had a significant cultural impact back then, and we're going to talk about what I mean by that, and why over the decades these films have stood the test of time, and why the franchise is alive and well. 5 films in now, and it's 2024. First one came out, produced 1979, 78, 79, came out in 80. You do the math. Going on 45 years ago. Are you kidding me? New film just released today. There's so much to cover. So let's go ahead and get right into it. And I'm really looking forward to having fun with you guys tonight, sharing some of my thoughts and perhaps some shared experience with these films. But most importantly, your buddy CJ, with that Real Gearhead Talk, I got to ask you guys something. You got to leave me those comments. Do you agree with what I'm laying down here? Do you agree? What was your experience with these films? What's your perspective on why they were so important? What are your favorite aspects of these films? Because I'm going to share some of mine, and I'm not going to be shy about it. Your buddy CJ going to give it to you straight, and we're just going to have a lot of fun together as we always do. Let's get into this. Mad Max and The Road Warrior, Mad Max Part 2, 1980, 1981 films. So huge. Let's get right into it. Guys, let's start out by talking about where it all began, the initial film, Mad Max. So, we're going to look at some things together tonight, as we always do. So, a couple things, guys. Mad Max, the initial film, 1979, depending on, international release, Australia versus the United States. Australian film came out in 1979, 1980, starring a very young Mel Gibson. Couple things, guys. Mel Gibson was not just young, he was very young. Are you kidding me? Early 20s. This was really where Mel Gibson kind of got his start. It wasn't his very first film, but it was one of his first films. Produced, directed, all of those things right in Australia. The interesting thing about the original Mad Max is that we've got a mature audience film, action, thriller, focused on the lead character. Get this, Mac Rockatansky. Is that not the most Hollywood 1980s name for a hero in a film? Max Rockatansky. This was before he was the Road Warrior, okay? First thing I want to tell you is Mad Max, in the annals of history, as we look back on it, really kind of has a prequel vibe. Purists out there on the internet, don't hate me for saying that. But as a guy who grew up in the United States in the 80s, nobody saw this film, okay? Let's be real. The significance of Mad Max is based on the blockbuster and the following that came from Mad Max Part 2, The Road Warrior. So we got to get that out of the way first, and I'll get more into that later. But when this came out, it was kind of a sleeper hit. This film was a moderate box office success in Australia. We're talking about Max Rockatansky, who is a police officer in this future state where society is breaking down and the roads are hostile places that are being overrun with roving motorcycle gangs. So you've got the heroes, who are law enforcement, fighting to protect citizens and what's left of the community from these roving motorcycle gangs. That's kind of the essence of the vibe. This is not post-apocalyptic. So post-apocalyptic elements that are so closely associated with the Mad Max franchise did not come from the initial film. That's very important. Many folks will kind of categorize this as a dystopia environment in Mad Max, where society is breaking down and lawlessness on the road, specifically the highways, is running rampant, and it's a dangerous, violent place because of wild scoot jockeys, as they're referred to in the Australian lingo by Max and the other MFP law enforcement dudes in the film. Okay, but there hasn't been like World War III yet to melt down all of society, the post-apocalyptic element that will come later on with the Road Warrior and will be a consistent theme throughout the other 4 films. Let's get back to Mad Max, though. This really takes place in a world on the edge of society intersecting with these outlaws. Now, what I will tell you is, first things first, this film produced, in the late 1970s for release worldwide in the early 1980s. Listen, is it a bit dated? Perhaps. It still holds up, though. I've watched some car guy movies, for example, like Bullitt. Bullitt, for me, with the exception of the chase scenes, does not really hold up. It's dated. If I go back and watch the original Herbie and the Love Bug, kind of dated, 1960s. Okay? The original Easy Rider as a motorcycle guy movie, but still, generally in the genre, influential films related to things with wheels, 2 wheels or 4 wheels. Easy Rider is a bit dated, kind of holds up. Mad Max does hold up, but you got to have some patience with it. If you haven't seen it, real talk, your buddy CJ is going to tell you, car guys, automotive enthusiasts, you need to go see it. And if you haven't seen it lately, please go back and watch it. And you tell me, leave me those comments if you don't think this movie holds up. And I'll get into why I think it holds up. In this screenshot, we've got the movie poster. There he is, Mad Max, Mac Rockatansky, the young Mel Gibson. Are you kidding me? It's just incredible to see that the man, regardless of what you think about him outside of his body of work and acting, an incredible body of work. But to think about this being sort of his humble beginnings and where this would take him, where this franchise would go, and where his career would go, it's kind of wild, right? And the other star of this film, the car. Now we're getting into the automotive enthusiast component. The car, which in this case, a Ford Falcon. Now, again, I'm not here to give you a documentary. We're just talking about these films, my experience, my knowledge. 1973, 1974, Ford Falcon, Australian built, XBGTs, running 351s. Okay, these cars were modified for the film. Let's keep going. Let's keep looking at some other scenes. But one of the key things I want to talk to you guys about is the fact that the stars of these films, these first two films, Mad Max, included Mel Gibson and all the supporting cast, the villains, and that car. That black Ford Falcon, also known as the last of the V8 Interceptors. I get chills thinking about it. But let's get into this film. A couple things about Mad Max that make it really cool and why I claim it holds up. You ever go back and watch like a 1960s or 1970s, even 1980s film, and it really kind of drags and you're kind of waiting for the action and it kind of lulls you to sleep? Not the case with Mad Max. Here's a shot right out of the opening of the film. This film starts with one of the great chase sequences of the genre. Hard stop. Hard to argue with that. What you see in this scene are the pursuit specials, okay? The MFP, the law enforcement in those Ford Falcons. They're chasing the bad guy. That's the Knight Rider, for those that know. And he's there with his lady. They committed some awful crimes. And the police are chasing them. This whole time, where 2 or 3 police cars are chasing the Knight Rider, the bad guy, we've got Max listening in on the police scanner. And he's putting his gloves on. And he's getting the shades on. He's getting ready to enter the pursuit. And it's this whole buildup. It's this whole buildup to the climax of when Max enters the chase. Guys, I get goosebumps thinking about it. This movie punches you right in the face out of the gate, okay, by getting you into that chase scene. And it's just fantastic. It is just absolutely fantastic. Now, guys, I got to say this. You ready? Mad Max and The Road Warrior, Mad Max Part 2, are violent films. Okay? So, listen. Dads out there with young kids, do not, your buddy CJ, my kids are adults now, right? I'm telling you, you may not want to watch these films with your kids. Very mature topics, a lot of violence. Okay, I'm not going to get into it. That's not what this channel is about. But what I will tell you is it's from a different time. It was a different time when these films were created, okay? And they're violent. Road Warrior is more violent than Mad Max, but Mad Max is rough. Like, I just went back for you guys. I went and rewatched both films the other night consecutively. And, I started with Mad Max and then I watched The Road Warrior. We're going to talk about the sequence there in a minute. Because, again, the way we consume these films in the 80s in America, I don't care what any of you think who weren't there. I'm telling you, and I was there, nobody saw Mad Max in the U.S. Nobody. 0. 5 people. 5 people saw Mad Max before they saw Road Warrior. Mad Max Part 2. There's a reason why the production company released the film in the US as The Road Warrior and not Mad Max 2. Because any one of us, anybody in the US in 1981, 1982, we would have said, what the heck is Mad Max 2? Nobody would have cared. That's an important element, okay? But I'm getting ahead of myself here. I understand in Australia it was Mad Max Part 1, Mad Max Part 2. No disrespect to you, but in the US, there was no Mad Max. Real talk. And please let me know if your experience was different. But I was there. I was a very young person. Your buddy CJ was very young. But that's my experience, and I'm sticking to it. Guys, let's keep going. Let's keep going. We're having fun tonight. Please leave me those comments, guys. You know I'll respond to all the comments I can, and I just love talking to you. Guys, listen. The original Mad Max film, as much as Mel Gibson was the star of this film, the other star of this film was the Pursuit Special, the last of the V8 Interceptors. Are you kidding me? Guys, if it wasn't for this car, this film would not be what it was. This whole franchise would not be what it is today if it wasn't for this car. It's that important to Mad Max, and it's that important to the second film, Mad Max Part 2, known as The Road Warrior. Guys, this thing is so cool. The way it's introduced in the film. You know, Max starts out the film as a hero. And that's a key theme. Like, you know, nobody believes in heroes anymore. If you look at the arc of his character in Mad Max, and I didn't realize this at the time, but going back and watching the films again, and we're going to keep pressing on here, guys, because I want to look at some other scenes together with you. If we go back, and here's a good shot. Here's a good shot of Max with the Interceptor. You know, if we go back and look at Max as a character in the first film, Mad Max, and we look at the arc of his character, he starts off as really sort of altruistic, law enforcement with sort of a hero role. His boss, his chief or whatever in the MFP refers to him as the last of the heroes. We need Max. Nobody believes in heroes anymore. And he's one of the good guys, right? Fighting off the wild scoot jockeys, the motorcycle gangs, who are clearly the bad guys. Now, the interesting thing about this film, and it's very important, as I kind of dissect it all these years later, going back and watching it as an adult versus young CJ back in the 80s. Let's not even go there. What I will tell you guys is he goes from hero to anti-hero to vigilante. By the end of Mad Max, he is vengeance. He is full of revenge and anger and hate, and he has become the anti-hero. He has become the vigilante. So that's an important arc, and that's an important theme in Mad Max. He goes from sparkly, clean, maybe, sparkling, clean, good guy, maybe with a bit of an edge to him at the beginning of the film. He is kind of the best of the MFP, and, he's an aggressive hero, let's say that. But through the course of the film, and listen, spoiler alert, but not sorry. The film's been out for 40 plus years. If you haven't seen it yet, that's your problem, not mine. So I don't mind giving you the spoiler. But, he loses his family in the course of the film to these motorcycle gangs, okay? So he goes out for his revenge and wipes them all out, right? I'm going to choose my words carefully. He also steals the Interceptor. He runs afoul of the law. So Max goes from clearly the good guy to the anti-hero vigilante, the classic anti-hero. And that's super important. What is an anti-hero? Still a hero, okay, that we can all get behind, but has characteristics of a bad guy, kind of a hero with a dark side. And, certain things that he does are questionable. Perfect arc for what we saw in Mad Max. And guys, it gets violent. The film is rough. But now, as a car guy, let's talk a little bit more about what really turned us on to this film, or at least what turned me on. And I want to know if you guys agree. So listen, here's another shot of the Pursuit Special that's been modified. You've got that Weyland supercharger, which from a production standpoint, I understand wasn't even functional. One of the cool things, who remembers? One of the coolest things about the original Mad Max and Road Warrior films, the first two films, was when Max, played by Mel Gibson, would be in a pursuit, either in the first film or the second film. He's in a chase scene and he needs that extra boost. He hits the switch on his shift lever and it engages the clutch for the supercharger, for the blower, and that thing starts spinning and that car takes off, cuz. Let me tell you something. If you grew up in the 80s and you saw these films, when you saw Mad Max hit that switch and engage that supercharger, you were hooked. If you weren't a car guy before you saw that scene, you were a car guy after you saw that scene, okay? You were hooked on the Mad Max franchise. You were forever bound to the Road Warrior and the Pursuit Special. And when you played with your friends and hung out, you secretly wanted to be the Road Warrior. So listen, car guys in the 1980s, this is an important film. Let me know what your experience is. And it's not just the 1980s. Because of the impact and the significance of Mad Max, Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, the decades, the late 80s, the 1990s, the 2000s, people were still watching these films. On DVD, on Blu-ray, on videotape, cassette, streaming. These films still had a following for so many reasons. The Mel Gibson tie-in. Mel Gibson, who went on, who remembers? He was the sexiest man alive on the cover of People magazine or whatever. He did Lethal Weapon. He did all these films. One of the biggest superstars of all time coming out of Hollywood. Okay? And he got his start. Basically his start, not his first film or his first acting gig, but Mad Max and then into Road Warrior propelled him for what was next. So there's significance to, Mel Gibson fans for this film and for broader pop culture. So a little bit more about Mad Max, and I want to get into The Road Warrior, Mad Max Part 2, because I claim it's so important. Couple other things. Here's another look at the police interceptors from this film. A lot of these got wrecked, these cars, they were banging, wrecking, smashing these Ford Falcons all over the place. Listen, the initial chase scene in Mad Max is worth the price of admission. Listen, your only homework from your buddy CJ, I'm going to give you one bit of homework, car guys. Your buddy CJ is telling you, if you have not seen the original Mad Max, do this for me. You watch the first 15 minutes. That's all I want you to do. Watch the first 15 minutes of the original Mad Max film, okay? And if that initial chase scene doesn't rope you in, reach out to me. I'll refund you the cost of streaming the video. Real talk? No, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, that initial chase scene right out of the gate to start the film is really cool, full of action, okay? And is the essence of this film. It's an action thriller. Very important. The original Mad Max, in my book, is an action thriller. A little bit of vigilantism, a whole lot of violence, okay? Now, what there is in Mad Max that doesn't exist in Mad Max Part 2 as much is the love interest, the family aspect, which is key to the story in Mad Max, sort of the origin aspect of Max Rokitansky, how he became the Road Warrior. He's got a wife, and it's a little bit about the relationship with his wife. He's got a young kid, okay? He's got his buddy Goose and other characters that he has relationships with. By the time Mad Max Part 2 comes out, he's hardened. He's more of a lone wolf, a bit different. We're going to get to that in a moment. But if you can be a bit patient with some of that, I can't believe I'm going to say this. There's some corny stuff in Mad Max, okay, with the relationship and the family aspect, probably important to the development of the story and the character. I get it. But what I'm telling you is be patient with that stuff. You watch this first 15 minutes in the first chase scene, you'll be hooked. Leave me comments if you disagree, but that's your homework. If you have not seen the first Mad Max, you go watch the first 15 minutes and you come back to me and tell me what you think. Guys, a couple other things that I think really made the first Mad Max kind of cool. Okay, guys, the villains. The villains in the Mad Max franchise are a big part of each of these films, all 5 films, actually. But let's talk about Mad Max, the toe cutter. The picture on the right, the guy with the two-tone color hair and the leather jacket, the dark brown, that actor played the toe cutter, the leader of the motorcycle gang in the first film. He is an awesome villain. He is an awesome bad guy. And he draws you in. There's not much depth to him as a character, kind of like Max. There's not a lot of depth, but there's something about him. The edge, the cruelty, the brutality, the imagery, the costumes, the dialogue, the cool factor. He is a very cool, evil villain in the Mad Max film. Now, interestingly enough, they brought that actor back to play a different character in Fury Road. Did you know that? Your buddy CJ giving you a bit of movie trivia tonight. Now, unfortunately, the actor has passed away. I'm not going to sit here and give you a list of all the actors' names and technical details from the film. That's not what it's about. But rest in peace. Certainly, it's sad that the man died. Kind of cool to see that he was able to reprise not even the same character, but just come back for Fury Road in 2015. Guys, a key element of why we were drawn into these films and why we continue to be drawn into these films is because they include really cool villains. It's the vehicles. It's the action. The stars. Are you kidding me? Mel Gibson in the first 3 films. We're only talking about the first 2. But the villains as well. They draw us in. And this becomes even more relevant in The Road Warrior, Mad Max Part 2. Guys, I want to keep going here, and I want to get to the second film, Mad Max Part 2, The Road Warrior. But before we move on, I just want to reiterate, key themes and elements of the original Mad Max film. The aspect of the anti-hero and Max's transition from good guy hero to anti-hero, full-on vigilante. That's an important theme and element of the film, if you will. The concepts of revenge, justice, okay? Societal breakdown, chaos, criminals ruling the highways, these roving motorcycle gangs, okay? This aspect of the chase scenes, the action, the cool villains. These are all tenets that you can trace even back to 1979, the original Mad Max film. Now, there's some things that the Mad Max film does not include, which we're going to talk about with The Road Warrior. But I think these were important elements. The other thing I want to tell you guys, they made this film for something like $400,000 back in the day. And it's my understanding that this film was in the Guinness Book of World Records based on its profitability. What it did with that minuscule budget and the money that it made on the back end. Just an incredible story, right? And directed by who? George Miller. Now, George Miller has been an important character for the creation of this franchise and also for directing multiple films. George Miller, okay? Let's keep going. Let's now, guys, together talk about the big one. And listen, in my opinion, this is really where pop culture, young people in the 80s really grasped on to Mad Max was the second film. So a couple things to start with when we talk about the second film. First things first, you'll notice this image that I have is probably from an Australian version of the movie poster. Notice that it's Mad Max 2. It actually looks like someone probably added that. This film was The Road Warrior in the United States. Understand this. Mad Max was not a huge hit in the United States at all. None of us knew about it. I'm telling you. So when this film came out, which this film had a huge budget, like $3-4 million, which back in the day, 1980 was big money, right? 1980, 81 when they made the film. $3-4 million, whatever it was. The original film, Mad Max, had a budget of like $400,000. So they're getting ready to release this thing, right? In the United States, first things first, nobody knows what Mad Max is. All the wonderful things I just said to you about Mad Max, the film was not a blockbuster in the United States or worldwide. It's pretty, had its success, if you will, moderate success in Australia, potentially in other places. I'm not here to dissect that. But I'm telling you, there's a reason why they released this film as The Road Warrior in the United States. Nobody would have known what Mad Max 2 is. Now, real talk, I'm going to be real with you. And I don't care who doesn't like to hear this, but I got to say it, guys. There are people who are like revisionist. Oh, don't call it The Road Warrior. They'll try to correct you and say, it's Mad Max 2. It's really Mad Max 2. Stop. Stop being a revisionist. Like, yes, in Australia, I suppose it was known as Mad Max 2, maybe elsewhere. But where this film came into its own, in pop culture, in the United States and beyond, as a blockbuster, was as The Road Warrior. This film was known as The Road Warrior forever until people started revising history and saying, oh, no, that's Mad Max 2. So listen, I get it. The original screenplay, perhaps, the original release in Australia was Mad Max 2. I'm not going to argue with you, but I'm here to tell you that for the purposes of pop culture in the United States, for your buddy CJ, who was there growing up in the 80s, this was The Road Warrior. For most people, here's another element. We got to talk about it. And I think sometimes people are almost afraid to say this. Most of us saw The Road Warrior first. Real talk. Nobody. You leave me comments if you were in the United States and you actually saw Mad Max first, but I want proof. I want ticket stubs from the theater. Guys, nobody saw Mad Max first. We all saw The Road Warrior first, and we got hooked on this film. And then, thanks to the advent of home video, before Blockbuster Video, we'd all go and rent our videos and our movies when they came out on tape. Who remembers that? VHS, VCR tapes? Guys, it was only after we saw The Road Warrior that we went back and rented Mad Max. And that's why I say, and this may be an unpopular opinion, but for most of us, the way we consumed these first two films was that we saw The Road Warrior, okay? And then we saw Mad Max almost in prequel fashion. That's why you'll say, CJ, it's not a prequel. It came out first, and Mad Max 2 is the sequel. You are correct. But the way most of us consumed these films, I'm telling you, in the United States, we saw it the other way around. We saw The Road Warrior first, Mad Max Part 2. Then we went back and watched what for many of us was like a prequel experience. So leave me comments if your experience was different. I'd love to hear from you. But I claim that's how 99% of us in the United States consume these films. And that's how we experience them. Now, I got to say, couple things. Moving on. Mel Gibson reprises his role of Max Rokitansky. Huge star, okay? Now we're talking about, Mel Gibson is actually I shouldn't say huge star. He's a star and he's recurring. He is such a big part of this film. But the other star that's returning is The Interceptor. There it is. And again, other common things about The Road Warrior, Mad Max Part 2, that we just got done talking about with the original Mad Max. This film also punches you right in the face with a chase scene out of the gate. My homework for you is the same as what I just shared with the original Mad Max. If you have not seen The Road Warrior, stop what you're doing, after you watch my video, of course. Stop what you're doing. Go out there and watch the first 15 minutes of the first film, and you'll be hooked. I want you to watch the first 15 minutes of The Road Warrior, Mad Max Part 2 also. And if you're not hooked, we'll gladly refund your streaming fee. No, we won't. But in all seriousness, guys, you'll be hooked. This film, right out of the gate, doesn't mess around. George Miller got it right. He gets right into the action. So let's keep going. And I want to look at some other screenshots and talk about some other super important things I claim from the second film here. Okay, so there he is, Mel Gibson reprising his role of Max Rockatansky. As you can see, he's got his dog, which is kind of cool. The dog is a cool character as well. He's got his sawed-off there, and he's got the cool leather suit and all those things. Guys, one of the interesting things about this is that Mel Gibson does not have a lot of lines in this film, nor did he need them to reel us in and to draw us in as a compelling character. I think he had something like 16 lines in this whole film. Guys, leave me comments if you know different. I think it's like 16 lines. One of his key lines is, "I'm just here for the gasoline." There's my Australian accent. He whistles. He says that 2 days ago, I saw a rig that could, like all these cool lines that he has. But it's not like this film draws you in with this sophisticated, in-depth dialogue. Not the case. This film is violent. This film is action-packed. This film is visually stimulating. Okay? This film has cool vehicles. This film has compelling bad guys. We're going to get to that in a moment. And of course, the ultimate anti-hero, the coolest warrior of the wasteland, Mel Gibson as Mad Max. But it doesn't need, Shakespearean dialogue to draw you in. It's just a different genre, guys. And Road Warrior, Mad Max Part 2 had all of that. A couple other things I want to talk about that I think were super important about this film. So the Interceptor's back. There it is. Now, it's been modified, but one of the cool things is that this car for gearheads coming out of the 1980s into the 1990s, the 2000s, this car is legendary. This car is iconic. This car was one of the stars of the film, and it's an icon in Hollywood automotive lore over the decades. Ask anyone who's a car guy what their top 5, top 10 favorite car movies are and favorite cars from Hollywood. And the Pursuit Special from Mad Max and the Road Warrior is on everybody's list. That's just the way it is. And it's there. And I won't go into all the detail. I don't want to give you too much of a spoiler, but the car is definitely worse for the wear. Max has modified it. It's still got the supercharger, the blower sticking out of the hood. He's still got the cool switch that he pulls up on. He's got the lights and the dashboard as he's running out of fuel. He's got this thing wired to protect his fuel. I'll leave it at that. Got to be careful what I say here on YouTube due to guidelines. But guys, the Interceptor is back in the Road Warrior, and this car just drew us in. It was so cool, coupled with Max as this cool anti-hero. The imagery of this film is important, okay? And the car is a big part of that. Now, we're not going to stop there when it comes to imagery, because I want to talk about something else here that I think is equally important with this film. Okay, we've got the bad guys. Here's the Humongous. And now a key theme of the Road Warrior, now we're post-apocalyptic. There's been World War III. There's a bit of a narration at the beginning of the film to set the context. Now we're full on the fight to survive, and everyone's fighting over gasoline. Gasoline rules the world, and the bad guys are pursuing the good guys who have the gas, and it's life and death survival. Okay? The coolest villains in this film, just unbelievable. The Humongous. Look at the costumes. Think about being a young person in the 1980s. The imagery of this film just drew us in. These bad guys weren't just evil because of their deeds, they looked like something out of your nightmare. This was nightmare fuel. Look at this guy with the metal hockey mask and the huge muscles and the whatever the heck that neck brace is. The guy in the back with the football shoulder pads. The punk extreme gothic chick with the pink hair there and all the spikes and the studs. Like everybody's got a machete or a weapon and they've got these cool vehicles. The vehicles were characters in this film. Okay? And this was before CGI. What we had here were real characters with interesting costumes, okay? Real vehicles, heavily modified, tangible, things that look like you could touch. It didn't look like something computer generated out of a video game. Evil villains who were scary and who did awful things, and then really cool good guys, Mel Gibson, who we could get behind, okay? The ultimate anti-hero in Mel Gibson and the ultimate bad guys. This film was the perfect cocktail in so many ways for young people in the 80s and the 90s and beyond. Guys, let's keep going because I hope you're having as much fun with this tonight as I am. Really, really fun stuff to reflect back on. Okay, who remembers this guy? The Mohawk guy from Mad Max Part 2, The Road Warrior. One of the cool villains of 1980s films. This is one of the reasons, guys, why the Mad Max franchise has been so wildly successful. Specifically, the first two films and up to and including today. George Miller and the production company, the whole crew had put together so many interesting and compelling villains that had the imagery, that had the costumes, that had this on-screen presence. They did awful things. They were bad guys in every sense of the word. They drew us in this post-apocalyptic world where villains were really monsters and just these awful human beings roaming the wasteland, terrorizing everybody. And then we had the ultimate anti-hero in Mad Max, Mel Gibson, with the cool vehicles and the imagery, the costume, the scenes, okay? The cinematography, all of this was fantastic in the first two films, and I claim really peaked with The Road Warrior. Mad Max was great, but Mad Max Part 2, also known as The Road Warrior, really took things to the next level, guys. And I claim these films really stand up and pass the test of time. Let's keep going. Hopefully you guys are having fun. Leave me those comments. As I mentioned, I'll respond to all the comments I can. Guys, another important thing about the Mad Max franchise, and specifically the first two films, is the effect that they had on pop culture. If you're a fan of music, particularly hard rock and, for example, heavy metal, punk music, all that stuff, you know that bands like Motley Crue will not be shy about saying that the Mad Max franchise, specifically The Road Warrior, the second film, was a huge inspiration for them with their costumes. And it's not just Motley Crue. In the world of wrestling, you'll notice there were like the Road Warriors, a tag team. They had kind of that post-apocalyptic thing. Just more examples of how this film, The Road Warrior, Mad Max Part 2, directly influenced other genres of media and pop culture. Through the decades, guys, this was an important film. And you can scoff at it and say, it's just an obscure action film from the 80s, whatever. Not so much, right? This was important. And you know, guys, I kind of liken it to the significance of, if you think about First Blood, Sylvester Stallone, First Blood, and then Rambo, you can draw a direct comparison between First Blood and Rambo and Mad Max Part 1, Mad Max Part 2, The Road Warrior. Everything that First Blood did, a little bit more character development, a little bit more background, right? With some violence and action. By the time they came out with Rambo and Rambo 2, it was full on gore and a bloodbath. like almost all violence and like no character development. Same can be said for the first two Mad Max films. Mad Max, I liken it to First Blood. A little bit more character development. You got to be a little bit more patient with it, right? But it gets there to the action, right? And there's a lot of action. I claim that, there's probably more action out of the gate with Mad Max. Let me know what you guys think. Get to the second film, The Road Warrior, you got very little character development. Although, what I will tell you, the interesting thing, we talk about the original Mad Max, right? And there he is, Mel Gibson. When we talk about the original Mad Max, I told you that the arc of the character, and please tell me if you agree, Max started out as a hero, then went anti-hero, became consumed with revenge, and became full-on vigilante. In the second film, in the second film, The Road Warrior, Mad Max Part 2, Max goes from anti-hero, vigilante, like wild man of the wasteland. At the end of the film, based on the events of the film, he actually becomes more altruistic. He comes back after all this extreme violence and loss. He comes back to help the civilians, if you will, for no other reason. He's not just there for the gas anymore. Famous lines. He's there to help people. So it's almost, the character becomes full circle. I never thought about this back in the 80s, but now watching the films again as an adult, it's actually kind of interesting to watch the two arcs come together and then complete a circle around Max Rockatansky. Guys, I don't think I'm going out on a limb here too much. Let me know what you think. If you really go back and watch the films, watch the character arc in the first film, watch the character arc in the second film, The Road Warrior, Mad Max 2, and see Max come back around to being a bit more of a classic hero, classic good guy. It's fascinating. It's kind of cool, and I hope you guys are excited about it as you go back and watch it, because that's your homework. Your buddy CJ always gives you homework. You got to go back and watch it again. All right, guys. Listen, we got to have a bit of fun. Who remembers the Feral Kid? Now, this character from The Road Warrior, little boy, he's like 8 years old. He was actually known as, officially, the Feral Kid. He didn't speak any English. He just, he was like a wasteland baby in the post-apocalyptic wasteland era. He could only kind of grunt and moan, but he took on a role. He had some affection for Max, and at the end, Max had some affection for him, as Max kind of opened his heart at the end of The Road Warrior, the second film. But back in the day, we called this kid Chaka. Now, who remembers Chaka in The Road Warrior? You weren't there. You leave me comments. If you were there in the 80s and you saw The Road Warrior, you called this kid Chaka. And I'll tell you why. There was like this 1970s sci-fi series that had a character, a little cave boy called Chaka. This kid looked like Chaka. Leave me comments if you know what I'm talking about. But guys, again, compelling and interesting characters. This kid didn't even have any lines, but he was a cool and interesting character. There was also the pilot of the gyrocopter, who was this cool and interesting kind of wacky comic relief character in The Road Warrior. Everything about this film was cool. Everything, as I mentioned. Characters, costumes, cinematography, scenes, vehicles, actions, some violence of that genre. I'm not pro-violence, but in that genre, in that era, that was a thing for these action-adventure films, okay? Really kind of cool and interesting and fascinating. And this is why the first two films, guys, are so important and really roped us in as young people in the 1980s, into the 90s, well into the 2000s, and then ultimately, we've got the continuation of this franchise here in its 2024. It's just wild, right? Couple other things that I want to say as we think about these films, guys. So now that we've kind of gone over things with both of those films, and yes, there's a third film from the 80s, Mad Max 3, Beyond Thunderdome. Listen, I'm not talking about that tonight, because, yes, there were some cool things about that. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves. Tina Turner. Are you kidding me? Tina Turner was in the third film. I got to go back and watch that too. But that was kind of goofy. That was a goofy film. Listen, I think it did well in the box office just based on the star power, and it had a cool soundtrack and a music video with Tina Turner. All of these things. Mel Gibson again. But it didn't have all of the action and adventure and sequencing and cool factor of the first 2 films. It just didn't. And it has not stood the test of time like the first 2 films have. We could have done without the third film. If the third film was never made, and I don't care if this is an unpopular opinion, you guys leave me comments. I'd love to hear from you, actually. But in all seriousness, if the third film was never made, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, nobody would care. Like, seriously, I know it was about box office success, but the film is goofy, did not stand the test of time, and is not really significant to the history or the franchise. Sorry. And every film franchise perhaps has some of that. The second film is regarded by many people, Mad Max Part 2, Road Warrior, is regarded by many people to be the greatest sequel of all time. Now, I do believe The Road Warrior is a better film than Mad Max Part 1. I absolutely believe that for all the reasons that I've already mentioned. It's a very hard thing to have a series of films in a franchise and to have them get better. Look at Fast and the Furious for car guy films. Okay, the first film is the best film. You could talk about Tokyo Drift, maybe. First film's the best film. And they got awful. Yes, they were wild box office successes, and I've seen most of them, but they're silly. The significance of the films, other than just making money, which maybe that's what it's all about for the big, Hollywood filmmakers in the industry. But as a purist, as a film guy, your buddy CJ's a movie guy. I'm also a car guy. I'm an automotive enthusiast. The significance of the first film in these series is usually where it's at. The interesting thing about the Mad Max franchise is that most people regard the second film, The Road Warrior, as the greatest film. I know there are fans of the modern entries, Fury Road, Furiosa. We're not talking about those tonight. We're talking about the significance of the first 2 films. And I claim, even if you look at, listen, I'll put Road Warrior against Mad Max Part 2 against any of those other films. And if you're really honest, independent, and objective, and think about all the things that I said in the context, I think you'd probably have to agree. I do think there's something to be said for a time in Hollywood when it was okay to produce a film like a Mad Max, or specifically The Road Warrior, that doesn't have to appeal to everybody. It doesn't have to follow any social or political narratives. I don't get political on this show. But it's okay to have a film, for example, that appeals to young men. And I think The Road Warrior and Mad Max, make no mistake, they were unapologetically geared toward young men. Like teenagers, guys in their 20s, 30s. That was the target market. Make no mistake, these films were not targeted to the ladies. They were awful, violent films in many ways. Real talk. And typically, listen, I'm just being real with you. You can disagree with me, but most young women back in that era were not into those types of films. There were other films perhaps that they were into, but I digress. Road Warrior, Mad Max Part 2, the original Mad Max were unapologetically violent. These films have some extreme violence in them, okay? And that was a thing. Rambo, Chuck Norris films, Bruce Willis in Die Hard, the Die Hard franchise. Action adventure as a genre in the 80s was a violent genre. Perhaps things that were part of the sensibilities of Hollywood and what were socially acceptable for the mass media back then would not jive today. And I get that. I totally get that. This is 40 years ago. I was just a little kid when I saw these movies. A young man, anyway. So times have changed, but I claim if you can set aside and for pure entertainment value, take it for what it is. Okay, it's not really a political statement. It's entertainment. Go back and watch the first two films. See what you think. Think about the context and how these films, from an imagery, from a costume standpoint, from a fashion standpoint, how it influenced things like rock and roll music, heavy metal, MTV. If you don't think the Road Warrior influenced MTV, music videos, rock bands like Motley Crue, Judas Priest, and others, you're wrong. Maybe Judas Priest influenced the first two films to an extent. Those that know what I'm talking about. Go back and watch them if you're a Judas Priest fan. That's all I'll say. But guys, there absolutely was significant cultural impact from these films, pop culture influence. Guys, in many ways, another interesting thing about these films, just in closing, is that the violence, and this is going to sound kind of weird, the violence in films like Mad Max and The Road Warrior almost becomes another character. Hear me out. You expect it. You're waiting for it, right? I think young moviegoers in the 1980s for the action-adventure, action-thriller genre, right? We were there for the adrenaline rush, just like the horror film, the slasher films of that era, these gory slasher films. You were there for that scare, right? And for the horror factor, right? With films like Mad Max and Road Warrior, that action and adventure actually became another character, just as much as the car, the hero car, if you will, the Road Warrior's car, right? The Ford Falcon Pursuit Special, the last of the V8 Interceptors, that was a character, okay, in both films. So was the action and the violence. And that's just the way it is. Listen, it's a sign of the times from that era. And your buddy CJ just wanted to come on here tonight, guys, and talk about these films that I think are so important to pop culture, to the franchise of Mad Max, where it all started, the first two films. Okay. And as automotive enthusiasts, you better believe if you were an automotive enthusiast, a young person back in that era, 80s, 90s, you were influenced by Road Warrior, Mad Max Part 2, and Mad Max. And if you weren't, let me know. But I claim, gearheads unite. Let's agree that Mad Max and Mad Max Part 2 are super important films for our hobby and for most people who are fans of automotive culture and films. So guys, I just want to come on here because these films were a part of my childhood and certainly a part of my gearhead journey. I want to hear from you. Leave me those comments. Hopefully you had fun tonight, talking a bit and reminiscing about Mad Max and the Road Warrior. Leave me those comments. Give me a like and subscribe. Your buddy CJ loves you. Guys, until I talk to you on the next one, peace.